Hey everybody, welcome back to the Beyond the Peloton podcast. I'm Spencer Martin from the Beyond the Peloton newsletter. I'm here with my co-host Andrew Vontz from the Choose the Hard Way podcast, thebetterlab.io. We are going to run through some of the recent racing, Criterium du Dauphiné, the biggest races, Criterium du Dauphiné, Tour de Suisse, and of course Tulsa Tough, and then get into Tour de France, Unchained, the Netflix Inside the Peloton show, episodes 1 through 3. But Andrew, do you want to plug anything before we get going?
Yeah, the Better Lab helps you build mindful, science-backed practices to sleep better and feel good for the things you care about the most. We've got V3 of the beta of our app dropping in the Apple App Store soon. I would love for you to try it, and I would love to hear from you, hear what you think about it, how it's working from you. Like Beyond the Peloton listener, Chris Scott. Chris, thanks for being part of our beta and for your feedback. So please check it out. Search for Better Lab in the Apple App Store or go to thebetterlab.io to learn more. But Spencer, I know we've got the Dauphiné, we've got Unchained, but really the biggest thing happening in professional cycling in recent times, Tulsa Tough.
I mean, I actually, unironically, Friday rolled around last Friday and I was like, gosh, should I fly down? It feels weird not being there. It is really I would say the best race weekend in the US of the year. And, Unbound has surpassed it. Like, if we're being honest, that's the bigger, like, industry event. But, I'm not a corporate guy. I'm a grassroots guy. And that's what Tulsa Tough's all about. It's also just easier. It's in a city. You fly into Tulsa, within 10 minutes, you're in downtown Tulsa. That's where every race is. You get one hotel. You can walk to every course. The people of the town love it. It's an amazing event. And the TV production, I guess it's YouTube coverage, but it's surprisingly good. I watched all three races.
It's excellent. Yeah, let's not sell it short. I actually think that the Tulsa Tough weekend is probably the best productized and streamed professional cycling event in the United States right now. It was phenomenal. I think that it's everything you would want your live Criterium streaming experience to be like. It was, I mean, we're not talking about this wasn't like a USAC national championship static tripod VHS camcorder type of situation. It was excellent coverage. It really blew me away. It was incredible.
Yeah, and it's pretty wild being there. As you say, you can go to like national championships, and it's a big race, but then you're just in a field in Maryland by yourself, and it doesn't feel that big. But I didn't know what Tulsa Tough was, and someone was like, "Hey, do you want to go to a race this week?" And I was like, "Sure, let's get in your car. Let's drive down to Tulsa. What else do I have going on?" And I got there, and I was like, "Oh boy, this is not the Tour of Kansas City. This is a big deal." I was a bit overwhelmed that first year, had no idea what I was getting into, but it's a great race. The interesting thing, and I used to think there was a rule against this, but maybe the rule's dead and gone. That World Tour riders could not race these national level events, but Luke Lamperti from Soudal Quickstep was there. And if you've ever had like the thought of like, how would a World Tour pro do at this race that I'm at? We got our answer because he won the Friday night Blue Dome Crit. He won Sunday Crybaby Hill. That's the biggest, best race of the weekend. He didn't win Saturday, but he did flat with like 8 laps to go, and then it seemed like he never really got back to the front. But just like to put into perspective how impressive that is, he didn't have a team there. Obviously, like Remco didn't show up to lead him out. Him and Tim Merlier didn't make the flight over, but like the best crit racers in the country, like some of the best racers in the country, show up with full teams in the past, like just to get to the front to win these races. So to show up, no team, just like, I'll be my own lead out, man. Like on Sunday, he just let himself out. There's a massive fight for position behind. He's like, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to sit on the front. Then I'm going to hold everybody off and win the sprint. It's super impressive. Like shows what a big talent he is.
Yeah, Scott McGill conspicuously missing from Tulsa Tough. Scott,
Too easy for him, he said.
Yeah,
not hard enough.
He could have ridden there from Maryland. Instead, it looks like Instead, it looks like he was out diving for crabs and having a crab boil and barbecuing ribs.
I think he went to him and his whole team, which did affect the weekend. They did go to Tour de Beauce, I believe.
Okay.
Which is a bigger race. I mean, this is like a different discussion for a different day. It's a bigger race, and I guess more pertinent if you're trying to be a World Tour professional. But it's probably not as big of an event. Like Tulsa Tough's probably more people pay attention to it. How many like Tour de Beauce stage winners can you name in the last 10 years? But we got to talk about our Saturday night winner, Moritz Augustine. If anyone missed this race, which I can't believe that someone would miss this race, shows up with like some sort of Alpecin crit team from Germany. The man is 90 kilos, absolute unit. Just in the break, driving the brake. Two guys messing around, not pulling enough. He said, "You know what? I'm just going to drop these guys solo to the win." We're seeing a resurgence of the big men like Jonas Abrahamson won recently at the Brussels Cycling Classic. So your people are coming back into style, Andrew.
Yeah, it's great to see humans who are closer to my size out there winning bike races. I mean, did you note that Augustine on the Crybaby Hill race on Sunday, he was like right up there. I couldn't believe
Yeah,
that guy. That guy was climbing with Luke Lamperti,
I know.
like wheel for wheel. It was phenomenal.
We went through the era of watts per kilo, and I will talk a lot about watts per kilo later in the show. But I feel like we took our eyes off watts. Like watts are still important. And if you're a big dude who can throw down major watts, like Crybaby Hill is not beyond, getting up and over. And most hills aren't, like most races aren't. And if you're not going up the Tourmalet, like you can overcome a watts per kilo penalty. And like I thought Moritz was on a one man like mission to prove that this weekend at Tulsa Tough. And I do think it sounds like I'm joking, but I do think if more riders like sub Primoz Roglic level riders just got bigger and stronger, they would do better. Like I really think most national level racers would be better served gaining weight and just gaining more watts versus trying to be skinny.
It's funny when my wife Molly came into the room while I was watching Unchained last night. The first thing I said was, "Please turn your head away from the screen." The second thing that happened was I think she saw Jonas and she said, "He looks incredibly unhealthy." And I said, "Do you think that this is a healthy sport?"
he does. I mean, we did get a lot of naked wout. I mean, we're jumping around here, but yeah, we got a lot of
Yeah,
naked wout.
it's a
The
little sneak preview.
producers know what the people want with that. But I mean, if Wout could gain 40 pounds and he'd still be like really fit and he could show up and just dominate races like Tulsa Tough. He doesn't have
Yeah,
to lose or gain the weight to do that, but he maybe would be the best crit racer of all time. So yeah, I thought it was awesome to see Tulsa Tough. Like you never know, like post COVID, how are these events going to come out of this? But to me, it looked bigger and better than ever. I was sad to see they did finally barrier off Crybaby Hill. Back in my day, you had to fight your way up that hill through hordes of drunken people. Um, it was not fun during the race, so it's probably a good idea they partitioned it off. But I officially felt like an old man, being like these kids don't know how easy they have it.
yeah, I'd be remiss, Spencer, if I didn't snap the football to you and give you a chance to throw it over the mountain. Can you talk a little bit about your history at Tulsa Tough and some of the results that you scored?
I actually, you brought this up. I actually am having a hard time remembering my own. I
Oh,
think I
come
have like
on.
amnesia about my own racing. Um, I've been there so many times and I've done so poorly. Like that first year, just completely overwhelmed. Races moving 100 miles an hour. And then, one I had a good year as a Cat 3 and I showed up and I won the Saturday Brady. I think it was called Brady Village. I don't think it's called that anymore. But it's like the Greenville, the Black Wall Street neighborhood that was tragically and horribly bombed. That was kind of coming to light like as Tulsa Tough was getting started. So they changed the name of a few of these courses. I won that one and then won Krabby Hill the next day as a Cat 3. And then I upgraded and didn't do as well the next year. And then the year after that, I looked back. I actually thought I won, but I did not. I finished second. I like rewrote this in my mind. So I finished second
Wow.
at Brady Village. And then the next day at Krabby Hill, I kind of was overly aggressive and did not win. Probably should have that. Like I'm a psychopath. Like I sit around and I just think like, man, 2014 Krabby Hill. I screwed that up. I could have won that. Everything would have been different. And then I went back and did the Pro One race is the one that like the level that like Lamparty and Moritz were winning this year. And I mean, those races were moving 1,000 miles an hour for me. The best I think I finished decently far up one year on Crybaby Hill, and that was the best I ever did. But what's crazy is I went back and looked at my power files. And you're going like 28, 29 miles an hour. I actually would love to know what the average speeds are now. They're probably much faster. And it felt like you couldn't even stand up. Like if you stood up, it's too much wind. And think we're going like 3, 4 miles an hour slower than the first hour of a Grand Tour stage now. It's like it really puts into perspective how fast some of these road races are and how important aero is. And I mean, that takes us back to Mr. Moritz. I don't think I'd ever seen such aero discipline from a rider before in a criterium. Like he had these tiny bars, really aggressive position, never left it. And like that's probably what a lot of crit racing is turning into. Like how disciplined can you be in your physical aero position, and can you hold that for 90 minutes?
Yeah, it seemed that he'd been watching a lot of Dylan Johnson videos, and as I said before we got on the broadcast here, I did some deep research, which means I went into Maritz's Instagram account. So he was running what looked to me, I don't know, they're probably 36 centimeter bars. They were freaking tiny, and this
Yeah.
guy, this is a big human. I don't have all the stats. I think he is around 90 kilos. To my eye, he looked to be around 6 feet to 6'2", rather broad shouldered individual. And so he's on tiny, narrow bars. He's moving fast. And, it turns out he's German national champion in Madison points race and scratch race on the track. So this guy's spent some time on the narrow bars on the boards, Spence.
Yeah, he did ride that as though he was a track rider. I mean, those guys have amazing aero, like an amazing ability to hold an aero position.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to know, like, I need to like go over and learn more about the German crit scene. Like, what's going on over there? They're clearly producing some strong. He was saying in his post race interview, he said, "Yeah, in Germany we don't do crits like this. Every crit is a points race." So
Oh, okay.
that must be incredibly different.
Yeah, they still have a big fixed gear crit racing scene many years after the death of the Red Hook series. So that's still definitely going on over there. There's Rad Race and a number of other organizations. If you haven't checked out some of the Rad Race is on YouTube, they're most famous for their fixed gear races that take place on an indoor go-kart track, which Red Bull later brought that
Yeah,
concept to the
yeah.
United States. Yeah, so that's where they're actually honing all of their skills on go-kart tracks. That's how they get ahead.
Germany is, I don't think I've ever seen a country that is so, I was shocked how into like cycling, not like into the sport of cycling, but just into cycling physically a country is. And then how little interest there is in top level cycling. It's like such a disconnect, but it is like, it's what you think France is going to be. Like you go there and just like everyone's on a bike, you can ride a bike anywhere, like great cycling infrastructure. But they don't, I mean, I guess they need someone to like come and win the tour and not be doped, I guess, to kind of get the fervor back. But Germans are they're probably too busy riding themselves to watch pro bike racing. But to transition out of Tulsa Tough. Oh, and I was disappointed. I mean, I thought this guy was gonna like slam a boot. He looked like he just like would slam a DOS boot of beer. They offered him a beer at the end, and he said, I don't drink alcohol." So
Yeah.
I was crushed at that revelation. But more pro racing. You could argue it maybe at the same level, maybe even a little bit higher. But another Criterium du Dauphiné. Primoz Roglic wins. If you looked at this result sheet, didn't watch the race, you'd say, "Oh, that sounds about right." Primoz Roglic wins. Mateo Jorgensen in second. That's interesting. Derek G in third. What the hell happened there? Didn't know that guy could race a stage race. And Carlos Rodriguez in fourth. But Primoz, I think the last time we talked, it was last Friday. So over the weekend, Primoz wins stage 7, kind of running away with it, beats Mateo. And he's not dropping people. Our friends Benji and Patrick talked about this on their show, like after stage 7. Like if Tade's here, he's winning by 2 minutes. Primoz is not. Is he racing up to his level of competition? Is he doing just enough to win? What's going on? And people are already starting to complain, like Roglic is winning too much. He's too greedy. He chased down Marc Soler. Stage 8 rolls around, and you see, well, let's put to bed the greedy conversation. Let's never have it again, because you saw firsthand why you win as many races as you can, because Roglic has a bad moment on the final climb. I mean, these are tough final climbs. Like stage, I think it was 6, 7, and 8 were around 10% average for over 30 minutes. So for us, that would be like an hour at 10%. That's nuts. But he has a bad moment, cracks. It's Jorgensen. We should say his name right now that he actually might win the Tour de France. So Matteo Jorgensen, Carlos Rodriguez, and Derek G are riding away. Rodriguez and Jorgensen drop G at some point, and Rodriguez wins the stage. Jorgensen held on for second. He didn't really contest the sprint, I think, because he just gave it his all to get as much time as possible. Roglic crosses the line 48 seconds later, holds onto the GC by 8 seconds. So you see why he needed the 10-second time bonuses for the past 2 days to secure his win. If he's not as greedy, he doesn't win this race overall. But even before Roglic had this little wobble, just his watts per kilos were not the same as in the same ballpark even as like Tadej at the Tour or Jonas Vingegaard at the Tadej at the Giro, Jonas Vingegaard at the Tour last year. So the writing was on the wall that he's not in like Tour winning form, and then this bobble doesn't really do anything to make us feel more confident. And he crashed twice during the race, which you could say, well, that maybe affected his performance. But Andrew, what are the odds that he doesn't crash at the Tour? Like, seems like we should just bake that in at this point.
Yeah, he's definitely going to crash. I still think he has a snowball's chance of winning. And let's not forget, Primoz is 34. I mean, this guy's been doing his signature telemark podium flex for quite a while. He's not a young man in the sport of professional cycling. He's certainly not a Geraint Thomas, but he's not a Jonas and he's not a Pog.
He does have a snowball's chance. You know who rode the course the fastest at the Criterium du Dauphiné?
I'd love to know.
Mr. Matteo Jorgensen actually rode the race in shorter amount of time than Primoz Roglic, but didn't have as many time bonuses, so doesn't win the overall. I would say both of those guys, and people might be surprised to hear me say Matteo because he's unproven as a Grand Tour leader, and he appears, and this is kind of what was interesting about the Dauphiné. If we take away one thing, it's these big guys climbing very, very well on steep climbs. And I think it caught a lot of people off guard, like particularly Lascano. Lascano's big. He's listed close to 80 kilos. I don't think he actually weighs 80 kilos. But it's like Derek G, Matteo Jorgensen. Rodriguez is not small. Like, he's a pretty tall guy. And then Lascano, all climbing incredibly well on steep stuff. But like, if you can, going back to power, if you can put out the power and get light enough, doesn't matter what steepness it is. Like, you're going to go well. Like, you don't have to be really small to do well on steep stuff as long as the power is there to support that. And Jorgensen is like appearing to like excel at the type of racing that the Tour is about, and like less so Sepp Kuss, where everything's pretty hard. The climbs are controlled but hard. Time trialing, crosswinds. He's a big classics rider. He's going to do well in the crosswinds and the flat stages. He can position himself in the bunch. And these climbs, everything kind of gets ironed out because it's just ridden like right below threshold all day on these climbs. So if you can ride a high threshold power and get light enough, you're going to do well on these climbs. You don't have to be a Nairo Quintana or even Primoz Roglic type to do well. So if something happens to Tadej Pogacar, and I don't think Jonas Vingegaard, I don't even think he's going to be at the Tour, to be honest with you. And if he is, he's not going to be at a level above Primoz Roglic. That's just my opinion. I do think either Matteo Jorgensen or Primoz Roglic could win. I don't know what to make of Derek G at this point. That was unbelievable. Probably the ride of the week. I didn't see that coming. Israel Premier Tech has to be pumped about that. I guess Carlos Rodriguez, that's an interesting one too, because he wins the final stage. He's won more World Tour races in the last 12 months than Alberto Bettiol has in his entire career, and he has absolutely no sprint. So you'd think, how is that humanly possible? But he's just good at finding. He does well late in 1 week stage races, and he finds riders that he knows aren't going to really contest them. Like, he knew that Jorgensen wouldn't sprint, that he would just ride as hard as he could. So he's working with him, gets the win, kind of what happened with Ayuso, I believe, at Basque Country, which is how Rodriguez won the final stage. And then I think he won Romandy overall as well with like a good final stage performance. But 4th place overall, and Andrew, this is the Ineos blob that's happening again. 4th place overall, 5th place overall. Weren't able to parlay that into a podium. Even though they did well on that final day, like they did try to get on the podium. Is this just foreshadowing like more Ineos blob upcoming at the Tour?
Blob / when we get into our Unchained discussion and what Tom Pidcock would always like to do when he's in a race, which is number one, win, and number two, do whatever he would personally like to do in the race. I'm not sure how well that works with a bunch of people clustered in between, fourth and 10th in the GC fighting to have their GC position. I don't know how that works out. I think we're going to have some more infighting in trouble when we get to the tour. So I think this just foreshadows some big drama and strife within the Ineos squad. And oh man, I guess I'm jumping ahead. I also have to wonder how Geraint Thomas is feeling about not even being a character in the first three episodes. Before we go there, well, I just want to talk for a moment about some of the criticism of Primoz Roglic at the Dauphiné and how this portends that I think the way some people are thinking about this, he won, he didn't win by enough. He showed some wobbles. What does this mean? I think we have to remember, most importantly, Spencer, he won the race. Right?
That is a good counterpoint. Strong
Yeah.
counter.
So he won the race. And I think when we get into this discussion of Unchained, which overall I think is great. I love watching anything about professional cycling for the most part. And I think part of what we see in those first few episodes is, as opposed to what you're typically seeing through post-race interviews and in other spaces and places, the life of a high-level competitor at the very tip of the spear in any discipline, and especially in professional cycling, where your life is literally on the line many days when you're out there competing, it's a very psychologically fraught endeavor. And I was thinking about this, very similar to skill sports like golf or even pitching and baseball. There's just such a huge component of confidence and momentum for people who are winning professional bike races. I guess that's true in a lot of disciplines of life and sport. And I think we really see that in Unchained. So I have to think Primoz, the pavement sampler, has this very important win under his belt. Could he have done it in a more spectacular or better fashion like some of his competitors? Perhaps. But most importantly, he won the race. And I think that gives him confidence going into this competition.
Yeah, it's a really strong counter. I've been pretty critical of Primoz, almost dismissive of him if I'm examining my own narrative around him. But I guess the point of the Dauphiné is, if you want to win the Tour, you usually win the Dauphiné, and he won it. And when I'm looking at those stats, I don't go back through and say, "Ooh, Froome wobbled on this stage." Like, you don't want to be your best at the Dauphiné. You want to be good enough to win, and that's it. And you build to the Tour. And I mean, the last thing I'll say about this race is Primoz won, getting a lot of crap from people like myself. Remco Evenepoel, 7th overall, looked terrible in the mountains. And like my wife said, like, "Oh, you said Remco was a bad climber, but look, he's right there on the final stage." The man finished like 45 seconds behind Derek G on a mountain stage. Like, that'd be good for like most riders. But if you want to win the Tour de France, that's not getting dropped on 3 consecutive Alpine stages. That's not winning the Tour. That's not competing at the Tour. That's not podiuming at the Tour. Like, it's just not good enough. And I almost feel like he's skated by a little bit. It's like, oh, well, he's just not ready. This isn't the Tour de France. And then Primoz is getting a lot of crap for fighting through a bad moment on the final day and then winning anyway. So you bring up a good point about overlooking the win.
I am wondering, again, looking further down the results list, and I'm double checking here. I'm assuming Jai Hindley is on the Bora Tour team, correct?
I think that was the plan. He didn't look that good.
Well, that's what I'm
race.
saying. Like, how the mighty have fallen. I don't know what was going on, if he was sick or what, but he's 16 minutes and 29 seconds down, and he seems like the kind of rider. I mean, given his past results, that's not a great result for him. And if he is on the Tour team, it makes me concerned.
Well, he'd be at the Tour team to work. But the thing is, like, if you saw Vlasov at the Dauphiné, man, that guy was putting in work on the front, like, really impressive.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, Vlasov is 6th overall, not riding for GC.
As a domestique. Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah. So that's where you would want Hindley to be, not there, 2.5 weeks out. It is something to circle. And I think I've been thinking about this a lot myself, with Unchained is like, my wife brought up, she's like, "Well, why is Ben O'Connor so bad? Like, why is he not in shape?" Like, I don't think anyone's under training. Like, I don't think except remember this guy, Carlos Bentancur? He would always be undertrained and just like visibly out of shape. I think post Bentancur era, people are not under training. I think most of the time you're either overtrained or underfed, and you're just missing on the balance of starving yourself just enough to be light enough to climb and training a lot to be fit enough. So the thing I worry about is once you like this happened to Visma, I think it was the 2022 Giro. They just went over that precipice. They got a little overtrained, a little underfed, and they never came. The whole team just couldn't come back from it. So, either Hindley is still building towards his tour form, which is good, which is fine. He doesn't have to be up there in the GC on the first day, or he's somehow overcooked his training. Another person like that, Sepp Kuss, even worse than Jai Hindley.
Right.
Yeah, just terrible at the Dauphiné. But I do kind of wonder if now do both of those guys and both of those teams say, all right, the goal is to be ready for the Alps in the third week of the tour. Don't even worry about losing time in the first few stages.
Yeah, and we're going to get to Unchained. I know this isn't a Tour de France preview show. We didn't talk about this the last time that we gathered in this space to have these sacred conversations. Time, like all the media reports about not just Thymen Arensman gaining 8 kilos during,
Something like that. Yeah. Some
yeah,
insane amount of weight.
gained 8 kilos during the Giro, and this was reporting from Velo News. It was a good story. It had in-depth actual reporting, which I appreciated. And so this had been reported previously, and Thymen Arensman had talked about it in post-race interviews. He put on 8 kilos, I believe, of weight during that race. And then in the reporting, there were like 4 other Ineos riders. It's like, this is a common thing that happens during Grand Tours for some riders. And then it named 4 riders, all of whom were Ineos riders. And how have we gone from marginal gains to maximal bloat? And what's actually going on at Ineos where performance is being mismanaged this radically that these riders are lugging around, 15, 16 extra pounds?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly not ideal. I mean, did you see Ironsman's dad was like tweeting about the trainers being really bad there and ruining his son's form, which if
Is he actually Remco's dad? Do they have the same dad?
But I kind of wonder, I mean, allergic reaction would be my first thought about gaining that much, but it must just be this balance between jamming carbs down your throat without bloating. But clearly, I don't understand how that happens. Like you'd think that like 8 kilos is a lot, and I think that's mostly water retention, right? You're not actually like getting fat during a Grand Tour. Um, Something that I thought was our friend Patrick Bro. I don't know if you see his big promotion. He's now like one of the key people they replaced Moraine Zaman, who was their strategic mastermind, with like a group of people with the Roman. Remember when the Roman Empire had like 3 emperors at the same time? It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And Patrick's one of those people, which is just wild. Congrats to him.
I
But
thought you were going to say that they replaced him with Folgers crystals.
that would explain the team's performance as of late.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sans
Well,
Mateo.
congratulations. Yeah, congratulations, Patrick. It's fantastic.
But he was saying you can't lose weight during Grand Tours anymore. Like it used to be normal to go in a little overweight and you lose weight. So, I mean, we need to grill him a little bit more. We need to get him on this podcast actually and grill him about this on the mic about like what is actually going on with this fueling. Like clearly something's happening that we're not privy to because that is an insane amount of weight to gain while you're riding your bike. Tour de Suisse happening right now. The Dauphiné Suisse week is always just a blur in my mind. Like the Tour de Switzerland, Switzerland is a beautiful country and the race can be beautiful when the weather's not bad. It does nothing for me, if I'm being completely honest. If this is a safe space, a sacred conversation, this race is just, I always have a hard time getting excited about it. And so far, it's been the UAE show. I mean, that's the one big takeaway here is like Adam Yates is back, baby. Like if like we all forgot that he was the 4th best stage racer in the world last year. He's just dominating the mountain
Oh my
stages here.
God. I'm sorry. I'm looking at I'm looking at the I'm just looking at the results and I see Egan Bernal in third. So this just goes back to my theory that we're headed for a
Oh,
total
it's
train
they're
train
gonna have an
wreck.
entire it's like, why don't they build the plane out of the black box? It's like, why don't they have the entire team be leaders? Like, that's what they're
Oh,
doing.
perfect. Yeah.
No, it's we'll talk about that in a second. It's gonna get wacky for Ineos, but Yates doing amazing. Joao Almeida doing really well. Like not riding 5 meters off the back of the group for 4 straight hours. He's actually drilling it on the front for Yates and then finishing second himself. Bernal looks okay. And then actually Matthew Riccatello, American from Tucson. I always joke, like, if Matthew Riccatello's name was like Giulio Riccatello and he was Italian, I'd be like, this guy's a Tour de France winner. Like, he's gonna be a star. But because he's an American, I'm like, he's okay. But no, that's an amazing performance for him. Actually, I could see him riding himself onto the tour team, especially with Derek G emerging as like a overnight GC sensation. They're going to need climbing support. Matthew is like, they have, it's like, we need climbing support. Well, we have climbing support at home, and that is Matthew Riccatello. They don't have to go buy it. And then, I mean, my big takeaway here, Andrew, is I think we overcomplicate this a lot. Because, like, you think of like Tom Pidcock, Uda Brooks, Oscar Onley, Enric Mas, Wilco Kelderman, these people, it's like, who's going to get third at the tour? Like, Tom Pidcock's riding for GC. And then you watch the Tour of Suisse, and it's like, well, Tom Pidcock's just not as good of a climber or time trialist as Adam Yates. We overlook, I think we tend to overlook really, really good riders who aren't the best riders who have settled into that level. And like Adam Yates is that guy, like it's just now, especially after watching the Dauphiné, you could say maybe Matteo Jorgensen's broken in there. Derek G, I'd like to see him in a 3-week race. Maybe Carlos Rodriguez, but actually the exercise of watching Tour de Suisse for me has been like just remembering, like, oh yeah, there's like really good riders, and we shouldn't overrate the shiny new things below them. Like Tom, now I've like lost confidence in the Tom Pidcock for GC pursuit quest, whatever you want to call it.
I should know this, Spencer. I just want to identify. I'm getting really disturbed by the pop-up ads on Pro Cycling Stats. Is there a paid version of this so I can
Yeah,
get
so
ad free?
I
Like I can't take it anymore. I'm not buying a new gravel frame. Stop.
I do have a paid account and there's no ads. And
Okay.
it's very affordable, and this is not
All
an
right.
that would be amazing if they were a sponsor of this episode. That's how
Yeah.
we worked it in, but it's well worth
Okay.
it because yeah,
All right.
I had the paid account, didn't log in for like a year, and I was like, I guess I'm just getting pop-ups even though I'm
Yeah.
paying, and then I realized I had to actually log in.
Yeah. I feel like I'm on cycling news right now. It's not a good feeling. Okay. All right. So yeah, Adam Yates looking good.
Like really good, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just feel like we can tend to overcomplicate these things where like UAE is going to be really good at the tour, but I guess we already knew that. And the thing is, I feel
Right.
like Juan Ayuso, perfect example of the shiny new thing theory. We all like Juan Ayuso is very good. Podium to Grand Tour at 19 years old. That's unbelievable.
Right.
I don't think Juan Ayuso is better than Adam Yates, and I don't think he's done anything this year to prove that he's better than Adam Yates. Adam Yates got third at the Tour de France last year. You could say the only rider better than him is Primoz Roglic, who wasn't at that race. Juan Ayuso wasn't as good as Adam Yates was last year, and he's not as good as he is this year. So how does that work? The only question now is like, how does that work for UAE? Like, so Adam Yates, let's say he's protected leader 2A, like he was last year. He's there with Tade, but he's not putting himself over the edge to the point where he's being dropped. Like if Ayuso goes to the tour, like he's going to have to then slot into a true domestique role. And like if you've ever seen Juan Ayuso race, he does not like to do that at all. So that would be the one thing I'd flag here as a potential concern.
Yeah. And if I had to make up some criticism of Team UAE, which I'm not going to do, but I will just do it again. I'm pretending that I'm one of those people. I would say, are Adam Yates and Joao Almeida peaking too early by being 1-2 in this race? Does this mean that they're peaking too early and they won't be at the highest level at the tour? Does this signal some kind of potential conflict within what we know to be an absolute super team at UAE Team Emirates.
I mean, if you're Enric Mas, you are clinging to that take right there. You're saying, yeah, these guys have peaked too early. But that's the interesting thing about the tour this year. Again, not a Tour de France preview pod, but it's so hard. Day one is so hard. Day four, they go over the Galibier. Like you're good. It's as we saw with the Giro. Like Timon Arnsman was out of the GC day one, right? Because he wasn't ready the first day. The tour is going to be like that. So you have to be ready on day one, and then you have to hold that through day 21. So that's a difficult thing to do. Yates and Almeida certainly look ready. Um, the Egan Bernal, he's fallen into this weird valley for me where I'm continue to be impressed with how good he's gotten after his crash, like 16 seconds behind Yates on a pretty difficult summit finish today. He's not good enough to win the tour. He's probably not good enough to podium it, and that wouldn't normally be a problem if he was on Cofidis, right? Oh wow, Cofidis is pumped. Egan Bernal is riding a fifth, and we're all working for him. He's on a team that has, should we count the leaders? They have Egan Bernal, they have Geraint Thomas, they have Tom Pidcock, and they have Carlos Rodriguez. Did they have Lawrence Depluse? Let me look at, is Lawrence Depluse doing the tour? Yes, he is. So, what is that? 5 potential leaders at the same race?
Oh my
Like,
God.
how's that going to work? Like, Rodriguez didn't do enough at the Dauphiné to claim leadership. Fourth behind Derek G. That's not nearly enough on that team. Bernal won't, unless he comes back and wins this race, he won't do enough to solidify leadership. And it's going to be a complete cluster. And we haven't even gotten to the Ineos episodes of Unchained where Pidcock is fighting with Rodriguez over leadership. And I don't even remember, to be honest with you, I don't really even really remember Pidcock at the tour last year. Like that's how out of it he was in 13th place. Like if they have 3 guys in the top 10, it's going to be a disaster.
Well, since we're talking about some fantasy land type scenarios, maybe it is time to shift over to
Yeah.
Unchained. And I think I've got a good transition piece here. I was just, as we were talking about the Dauphiné and Tour de Suisse, the thing that I started to wonder based on episode 1 of Unchained, because as we're talking about who is potentially going to round out the podium at the Tour de France, one rider that has not come up in this conversation and that I haven't thought about as a potential actual podium contender is Richard Carapaz. So I was just wondering what's going on with Carapaz. Where is he? And then I didn't see him on the results list for
I think he's
Dauphiné or
at
Tour de
Swiss, right?
Suisse.
But he just
Well, but
DNS.
he just unfortunately he crashed out with Bettiol together, a 2-for-1, and he's injured his face, which I'm saddened to read that cycling is an incredibly dangerous sport. Uh, one of the few other than motorsports in which you might actually die while competing or participating in it recreationally. Um, yeah. So what do we make of this? And then maybe should we move on to episode 1 of Unchained, which does focus in part on Team EF and Carapaz as potential Tour de France winner, which I also just wanted to flag as we get into this conversation. In case you forgot, Unchained season 1, episode 1, focused heavily on Julian Alaphilippe and on EF Education Easy Post Project Stefan, which was trying to put Stefan Bissiger into the yellow jersey by the end of stage 1. Bissiger, of course, crashed out in a wet corner during the time trial and finished outside of the top 10. The master stroke of PR work here, though, is that these two teams made it into episode 1 and are heavily featured in both season 1 and season 2 of Unchained.
It's an open door policy. I'm assuming that's how they probably keep getting this feature. But yeah, let's just go into it because the Carapaz questions are segue perfectly into this. We can talk about it all there. Tour de France Unchained on Netflix. If you don't know what we're talking about, go look it up. It's pretty good. It's called Tour de France, like Heart of the Peloton is the actual real French name. It is a French TV show. Like, I think that could surprise people. Like, this is a show produced in French, made for a European audience. So just be prepared. And make sure I had a few people say, like, man, it's weird voices. Like, what's going on? Don't watch the dubbed version. Make sure you select subtitled because you'll just get like the same English speaking person voicing everybody in the show who's not speaking English. So make sure you
It's like
select.
watching South Park. Yeah, it's same people doing the voices.
Yeah. So episode 1, season 2, no risk, no reward. I'll just read the synopsis and we'll go. In the wake of a
Okay.
tragic accident, a shaky Peloton starts off the tour in the Basque Country as Team EF Education Easy Post pins all its hopes on one rider. I assume they mean Richard Carapaz, but the show opens essentially it says the Pyrenees, and then we see Julian Alaphilippe and his wife and what I think is his son in a beautiful home. Do you think this is their house or is he at some sort of training camp?
It's maybe their house.
It's a beautiful home, great place to live. I actually realized like I never really thought about like what is Julian doing on the day to day? Where's he living? But
Not a goat
not
farm.
a goat farm. Was his kid
Yeah.
better at the Strider than you thought, or just about as good as you thought he would be?
He was all right, not equal to Cavendish's kid who has the drop bar micro bike though that they're yelling at to get in the drops in episode 3.
Well, I think the age is different. I loved that, by the way. That reminded me of that.
Get in the drops. Put your hands in the drops.
That is
Whoa.
basically my driveway at 4:30 p.m. every day. My son is doing the Tade counting the victory wins when he comes across the finish line now. But yeah, I thought his son was pretty good on the Strider. I mean, it makes sense. I was like, man, this kid's ripping inside. But they show Alaphilippe, and then I mean, I guess they must have like some deal with Alaphilippe. But then it's a little awkward because then he's not doing anything. It's like he's here, he's in the show, he's at his house, and then he like throws up a donut on the road. So his inclusion is a little funny. I'm trying to not look up. I don't remember him at the tour last year. He did kind of nothing of note, got into some breakaways. I will say they don't say this in the show, but if you pay attention, so his wife is in that scene, Marion Roos, great cyclist herself. She's also, if you listen during the show, she's the voice of like the commentator for French TV. So she's commentating on her husband as like a professional sports commentator, which is really strange. Can you think of like another situation where this has happened?
I mean, I can think of a couple that maybe I'm not going to get into right now. She also runs the Tour de France Femmes, right?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, which would mean she's an ASO employee.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little funny in itself, but
Yeah, she's the director of the women's Tour de France, which is incredible. Like, what a fantastic race. But if we're going to talk about conflict of interest, which I'm not sure if that's even a concept in an entertainment product like this. But yeah, Alaphilippe, the focus of episode 1, season 1, and episode 1, season 2 makes sense in the context of this is a French TV show. He has perhaps the most famous goatee in France. And the only thing that could top that goatee is Thibaut Pinot with several burlap bags of day old croissants feeding carp. I mean,
I thought it was like if you asked Chat GPT, like, draw me a picture of Julian Alaphilippe at his house feeding carp. Like, this is the video. It was surreal and bizarre. Like, I didn't understand what was happening at first. It was just dumping out like bags of croissants, baguettes, and just throwing them into a lake. Not a care in the
yeah,
world. Where did they come from? Does he have a bakery? I don't know. I needed more
yeah.
exposition on that, I think.
Yeah, maybe there's a bakery in the village and he has a preferred relationship with them. But I do wonder, is Pinot the Marie Antoinette of the pro cycling peloton feeding croissants to carp?
Let them have croissants. And you can understand how his career went downhill. I mean, imagine how stressed he is when he's on the road and he's thinking, who's feeding the carp? Are they being fed the right croissants? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he's racked with with constant anxiety about that. It is funny. It's French show. They have to do this. They open on two French riders who are pretty mediocre at this point in their careers. Alaphilippe has since gotten better since the show aired, but that's a funny thing. And then it goes to Ben O'Connor at Ajay Duer training camp. And I want to get your thoughts on Ben O'Connor. Like, he's their GC leader. He got fourth at the what was that 2021 Tour de France, I believe, and has kind of struggled to match that since. Good rider, I like him. We do see a scene where he's by himself riding, team car behind him, and he's just screaming, just like screaming angrily because he's not producing the watts he wants to produce. Did you like identify with this, or did you think this was kind of wild behavior?
I don't know. He kept talking about the muscles being blocked in his legs as well. I think this kind of goes back to the point that I started to bring up related to momentum and winning and why Primoz Roglic is in a good position entering this tour. You know, Ben is on a team that does not have the best resources strategically, as we saw. They made some incredibly questionable decisions. And if I were Ben, if we get to episode 2, I would have been just as mad as he was. So like, there's some stuff going on in the team maybe we're not privy to. He does seem like he's psychologically fragile entering this Tour de France. He doesn't seem the vibe that I got was not just the competitive aspects, but the life of a pro cyclist, which is, it's life on a road in shitty hotel rooms for the most part, most of the year, or being locked in a chalet on a volcano. Maybe not something that he loves doing. And he has the genetic capability and the work ethic to be up there in some of the most selective moments of these races, but he just seems like he's cracking before the race has even started.
Yeah,
It
exactly. Yeah.
seems like he's actually beaten himself before the race begins. And we saw moments like this with a couple. I mean, we see it with a lot of the competitors as we get deeper into the series, where you get a look at these challenging moments for these riders where something has happened. I'm thinking of Wout on stage 2. I don't remember which episode it was in, but he throws his bike. It was stage 2, right? Am I thinking of the right
Stage two,
stage?
episode one, end of the episode
Yeah.
that we're just talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Wout gets stuffed, doesn't win the stage, throws his bike, throws his helmet. He's really angry. Nobody's sticking a microphone in his face at that moment, or it didn't make the cut. And as you pointed out, like, yeah, Wout is a more talented bike rider probably than Ben is. And this is part of what happens when a series is made. And if I'm Ben and I'm portrayed this way in this show, I mean, I have to think his value on the transfer market is way down if other directors are getting a look at this and they think that this is the totality of his behavior and his psychological profile as a writer, probably.
I almost, I kind of wonder if this is more common than we think, especially with GC leaders. But the big difference with Wout and Ben O'Connor, based other than their level, is like Wout was pissed after really pissing away what should have been a stage win. Like that was unbelievable. He didn't win that stage win at the tour. Ben is like pissed at riding by himself at training camp. That's to me, that's not a great sign. Like the training camp should be a place of serenity. You should feel amazing. Like you can take on the world. And as you say, he's beating himself before he even gets to the race. That didn't seem great. And then yeah, complaining about the muscles, like what he's describing is feeling blocked. And then it doesn't seem like the team has an apparatus to say like explain the training or like we're doing this and this is how you should feel. Like it just feels like, oh yeah, he went out and did some riding and he felt kind of tired when he was riding, and then now he's not doing well in the race. Like nothing seems to be that dialed in, if that makes sense.
All right. I feel like my brain has been erased. I'm remembering some of this stuff out of order, it's just all a bit of a blur, having binged a couple of these episodes. What we're not talking about here is, I don't remember when in this sequence of events, early on in episode 1, Ben gets stopped on a training ride on the mountain, and his DS or the trainer gets out of the car, and they're like, oh man, we got to tell him he was best friends with Gino Mater. So it sounds like he was super tight with Gino. They stop like in the middle of a climb and they're like, hey Ben, Gino died, basically.
Yeah, no,
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
almost exact. The beat of the conversation is exactly how you said it right there.
Yeah. And then they just kind of like leave him there. The team, I don't know if it's a DS or a trainer, kind of like pats his shoulder. It's a half hug. And then he's just sitting there in the middle of, doing a climb. So the guy just lost his best friend, which, to give him and to give him some grace. Like that, I think I kind of forgot that as we got deeper into episode 1, into episode 2, and then throughout the series. So I bet that was pretty psychological, destabilizing. And let's keep in mind, I mean, Quinn Simmons, incredibly talented American rider, he almost quit the sport after seeing Gino die in front of him on the road. So it was a highly traumatizing experience for people close to Gino. And I wonder if that's part of what's at play here. And maybe we'll see it if there's another season of Unchained. Something I also thought is we saw this portrayal of Ben, which is a pretty negative one, I would say. I would be curious to know what's going on in Jonas's head right now, or some of these other riders that went through very severe physical trauma in a downhill scenario just a couple of weeks ago, and like how are they feeling psychologically? We don't know if Jonas is going to race the tour yet or not, but like where are they at? And is he still this adamantine, just like rock solid, super confident guy, or has he been rattled? I'd have to guess he's probably been pretty rattled by that experience. We don't know yet,
You
though.
would think. It is interesting that
Yeah,
it's like both Remco and Primo's same crash at Basque Country. Both have crashed since then. In some ways, that's helpful. It doesn't loom as large in your mind, and it kind of puts distance. If you have a bad crash, you can kind of like it's you physically like can almost like remember the pain, and then it like starts to loom large in your mind, and you start to think like, what happens if I crash again? Is that all? Are all the injuries going to happen again? And it can be helpful to just get it out of the way. So it's probably actually good that Evenepoel and Roglic already crashed again. Another like subplot here. Let's just get into it. Richard Carapaz. So they're like focusing on. I kind of felt like they were bouncing around a lot. Like if you were a casual viewer, would you be like, "Wait, what? Gino made her what? What just happened?" Like that didn't feel like that was set up extremely well. And then they're into EF and Richard Carapaz. I was surprised to see Votters say that this is the biggest investment the team has ever made from a salary standpoint
right.
by a long shot. I say I'm surprised because they had a rider finish second at the Tour de France, Rigoberto Urán. Like I'm a little surprised, and Richard Carapaz's best tour result in his career is third. I was surprised that he could command that amount of money for them, especially since he was already on. I hesitate to use the word downslope, but if you remember his last year at Ineos, it's the year that Hindley beat him at the Giro. He kind of biffed the Giro if you go back and watch that race, and then completely falls apart at the Vuelta in a GC sense and starts going for stage wins. Right there, you kind of start to wonder: is he done as a stage racer? Is he a stage hunter now? Which is a completely different salary bracket. I was surprised to see that they've staked so much on a veteran former GC contender. That's the type of rider, if you're a budget conscious team, you want to stay away from, and you'd rather go more towards like the young talent that UAE specializes in.
Yeah, and maybe he is the highest paid rider ever at EF. And maybe the more remarkable thing is that for 2 seasons in a row, we get this. It had to be made for TV moment where Butters like sits down, he like walks into the room, the big table, all the staff are there, who I'm assuming are making all of the actual strategic and tactical decisions. It looks like they're like sitting down 2 days before the Tour de France, and Butters is like, "All right, so what's the plan? How do we get this guy on the podium?"
Yeah, these guys have been talking about it since like November at the first camp.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I would assume there's a bit of annoyance in that team that he kind of comes in and acts like he's calling all the shots when the Unchained cameras show up. I will say our friend Jonathan Kaplan mentioned this too, and if you compare it, I believe this episode also introduces us to Ralph Denk, who's the former owner, or now partial owner of the Bora Hansgrohe team, founder, GM, CEO. He's not at all what I expected. I kind of always assumed he was like a slick businessman type. It seems like when you see him, he's just like seems like this is a man who's going to serve me a beer at like a Bavarian hiking hut or something. Just like a very folksy, has like a folksy mustache. I was shocked at how, and I'm like a Ralph Denk fanatic now. Like I'm ready to join Bora. I'm on board. Um, And if you go back through his biography, he's like just like us. Like, Ralph Dink was racing. He was like a good amateur racer, and then he raced 1 year as a pro, and then he started a bike shop, and then he's like, I want to start a team. And that team became one of the biggest teams in the world throughout 15 years. I was surprised how like present he was in the team, and the emotional connection he had to the
Yeah.
team and the riders. That really struck me. And then you get that contrasted with Jonathan Vaughters, who, I'm trying to be like balanced here, who seems to not care about the riders at all. Like he introduces Carapaz as the biggest investment the team has ever made. Richard Carapaz crashes. They don't really seem that concerned about Richard Carapaz, and he has a very bad knee injury, like a broken
They
knee.
don't even send a rider back for him. He rode
No,
by himself to
they're
the finish.
screaming from the car, we gotta go. What the F? We gotta go. It's like, this dude's knee is open. Like, you can see the bone. What are we doing? And then he's like, from an investor perspective, this is just unacceptable. Like, why would you need to say that right then? I just didn't understand that at all. It was as if they captured that in December and then inserted it. But I don't know why you would need to say that like moments after your team leader abandoned with a broken kneecap that was not his fault. It's just what happens in the sport.
And just to maybe give him the benefit of the doubt, it also, for maybe the casual viewer, really amplifies the drama of this moment and gets EF more airtime, which maybe that's the more
Yeah.
significant thing to actually get some value out of the investment, is like, let's really milk this thing. Yeah.
But it's like
Two other
his crash makes my job harder. It's not like this is
Yeah.
tragic for Richard.
Yeah. I mean, the most tragic thing I thought for Team EF in that first episode is the bucket hats. I'm sorry.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we, like, what's going on?
There's nothing sadder to than the bucket hat after he's crashed and broke his kneecap, and he's got to put it back on. It's like,
Yeah.
that's
Don't get me wrong.
Hat.
Like, I'm a big LL Cool J fan. I like Kangles. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's working for Team EF. Yeah, so that first episode, though, I have to say, like, I think we get some Jonas in that episode as well,
A
who
little
like
bit of
has
Jonas Light.
Yeah, Jonas Light, inhuman level of leanness. And who else did we get?
So we got the two other ones we got were Adam Yates flying, the Yates twins.
Yeah,
kind of crazy. In the show didn't dwell in it too much, and I feel like there's not a lot to say about it. It did strike me as that is wild. Just two identical twins. Maybe they're not identical, but they do look like identical.
I think they're. Yeah, we should. Yeah,
they look almost exactly the same, but just two brothers off the front of the tour going for it too. There's no gifts in that. Like, they're racing each other for, like, the crowds were massive, probably partly because it was the Basque Country and sports are life in the Basque Country. But that is a special moment. Like, almost as if you would think that was fixed for that to happen. And then the other thing was Tom Pidcock really like struggling with confidence, like really not believing in himself after that first stage.
Okay, now that I'm remembering more of the episode, and something that I thought about as well, I've forgotten so much of what happened at the tour last year and the year before that. And I just like loved reliving the beginning of the race, because I think we all thought that race was going to unfold in kind of this scripted linear fashion and just be this Jonas Pog battle, which in part it was, but also we had these red herrings with the Yates twins up front. And then we had Jai Henley. I remember, I'm going to call you out on it. I think, Spencer, there was a moment when you said Jai Henley potential Tour de France winner in 2023.
Potential.
Right?
I mean, he's took the start. I think
No, but I mean, I think you were like, man, we might see him go to Paris.
I think I thought the podium was like,
all right.
I do remember, because it is interesting watching this. It's actually really helpful because it refreshes you before the tour starts about the last year's tour. It does take you down an emotional memory lane that you can repress, like Jai Henley. I never believed in that guy. But you watch that episode and you're like, Jai Henley's going to win this race. They're not going to get him back. And I did think, I was like, he's the third best rider at this race. Huge mistake that they let him up the road. He faded a bit after that. But that was, so let's go to episode 2, the third man.
I want to say one more thing about episode 1, which is when they ask, I thought that this was really interesting psychologically, and I'm going to make a comparison that might bother a lot of people, and I'm okay with that. When they ask Jonas whether he thinks Pog is going to be at his very best. He says, yeah, I absolutely believe he's at his very best right now. And I only want to beat him at his very best. I just thought his psychology around that was interesting, and it seemed self-serving and a bit manipulative and engineered, because there was no way Pog was going to be at his best. He'd just broken his wrist like a
Well,
month prior to that, and
now they're
it reminded me a bit of Lance, honestly.
well, Jonas does remind me of Lance. That seems ridiculous at first. Like they seem nothing alike. If you peel away like just the aesthetics and how they are in front of the camera and stuff, he actually does. He really does remind me of like an Armstrong-esque competitor. Like singularly focused on winning. I think people kind of mistake him for some sort of like, oh, I just found myself winning all these tours. That's odd. But I was surprised. It's funny that we're paying the favor now because now Tade and UAE are like, who's the favorite for the tour? Jonas Vingegaard, because he's going to be at his best. It's like,
Right.
there
Yeah,
probably is a little
totally.
bit of like not great feelings from, because clearly Tadej Pogacar was not going to be at his best after he
Right.
started riding his bike outside in May. Like that's not.
He's running around with the weighted backpack from
Yeah,
what? It's like, what are you doing, man?
rucking. Got to get
Yeah.
Peter Atzi
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah. He'd read Outlive apparently way before everyone else.
So episode 2, the third man, Ben O'Connor, the new leader of AG Duer Cetrion, sets his sights on the first mountain stage as fellow Australian Jai Hindley vies for the same win. This episode, my initial review, it really reminded me how exciting the first week of that tour was last year. Like, I thought this was one of the stronger episodes that I've seen from the series. It
Yeah.
starts at the Sierra Nevada training, and this is really good. I feel like we got better training camp footage this year. A lot of just like beautiful training camps, but this one, it's like exterior shot, Sierra Nevada, 5 months before the tour. Looks miserable. It's snowing. It looks like these guys are at like a Mars mission, where they like lock people at like a top of a Hawaiian volcano and they can't leave for 3 years to see how people would react on Mars. Like that's what this felt like with
Yeah.
these riders in there, and everyone's wrapped up in their PJs in a meeting room. Completely unhelpful advice. If you actually really listen to what the team director's saying, he's like, so some of you haven't been to the tour. The tour is the tour. Well, like, okay, well, you just described a word. The
Mm.
description is the word that doesn't help. And then he's like, the tour is is a color. The color is yellow. Everybody wants it. It's like, well, I'm no closer to understanding what is expected of me based on this briefing so far.
Yeah, and I think they used another thing that struck me in this episode. I don't remember the name of the team director. They sit down with Ben O'Connor, who also has like a personal hype man. Like he has his own Flavor Flav to keep him in a
Yeah,
good
he did.
space,
Yeah,
right?
I did notice that. Yeah,
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we've seen this in some, like in the F1 show and the golf show. There are a lot of pro athletes like this where, they have their entourage or there's the one specific friend. This guy does seem, I mean, actually, we see it with Cav, right? Is it Markov? Is that who he has? Who's the guy that's like his sprint director guy on Astana?
So like Morkov rides for him,
Okay.
but then there's Mark Renshaw, who's like
Yeah, sorry,
just his
Renshaw.
handler now,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But Renshaw seems to play a bit of that capacity on Astana. Actually, it's just somebody he's personally comfortable
like a
with.
liaison, basically.
Yeah, and understands his psychology, and I think helps Cav stay centered maybe when he's out on the road. Anyway, so Ben O'Connor, he's got a guy like that. Then the team director sits him down. They're like, "All right, Ben, we know that this can be psychologically challenging for you. So now we're gonna fix this." And then they show him like a Microsoft Paint presentation. Well, I was like, whoa, man, like this is how you're going to do this with this guy? Like you're sitting him down with a PowerPoint it just didn't seem super high tech to me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's like, I'm always like nervous that like something I have created ends up on one of these. But yeah, a lot of times you're doing them really fast. Like if you notice, Ineos will have like goals for the day, and it looks like like your
Yeah.
son did it really fast, because you are under the gun. But yeah, with the Ben O'Connor thing, it's like you had months to do this. Like this, and why does it need
Yeah.
to be a PowerPoint? It just be a conversation with like a printout. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know the whole operation. Like, I kind of walked away from this and I realized this is an insane thing to say. I was like, think I could run a pro. Me and Andrew could run a pro cycling team, like as
Yeah, I
long
think
as we
we
weren't expected to
yeah.
like be the very best.
Yeah, I think we probably will, and it'll probably win the Tour de France. So I'm making that prediction now. Yeah, I think that there are some aspects of high performance and management that are likely not being used in this team in particular. Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
was kind of. I thought it was both weird because there's after. I guess we could just get into this now. So Jai Hindley goes into the breakaway. This was stage 5, I believe. I thought it was really interesting in the Visma bus they show you where Jonas asks, he's like, do we want to help them control it? And they're like, no, let's let stuff get crazy. Just let it get crazy, get under UAE's skin as much as possible, which is really smart in retrospect because you forget it now, but Tadej Pogacar looked like the favorite at that point. He looked unbeatable. Um, so Visma elects not to help them control it. Jai Hindley sneaks into the break. Probably never should have happened. Ajay Duer has 3 guys up there working hard, letting Hindley sit on, which is crazy because I guess they're working hard for the stage win, I would assume, because their GC leader's behind. They're dropping him. And
but
they're,
none of them have a chance of winning against Jai Hindley.
yeah, and they're pulling a better rider to the finish line. So you're not going to win the stage because of Jai Hindley, and you're hurting yourself in the GC. That makes no sense whatsoever. And then, Ben O'Connor's understandably pissed about this. And they're just like screaming at each other. And he kind of has his hype man there. But that was the one thing about the team I was kind of impressed about is that I think the director is like Julian Jurdy, the main director you see in all these scenes for them. Just kind of like, I thought he kind of handled the outburst well, that it was just like, let's just all yell at
Yeah,
each
I
other and
agree.
like listen to him.
Yeah.
And thought it was a little weird. Vincent Lavenue, who is he was the team owner at the time, I think, of the filming. Now he sold the team to, I think it was Ajay Duer, now owns the team, the insurance company. But he's like standing in the corner, like talking about Ben O'Connor, like he's not there. He's like, hey, this isn't an intra Australia championships. We can't just care about that. I'm like, dude, the guy is standing right next to you. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and it was a demonstrably bad strategic decision, as you noted. 3 guys pulling the guy who's actually going to win the race from a different team for no reason. Like not even
Yeah.
making him do it. Didn't make I mean, as Ben pointed out, did he take even one pull? And they're like, well, don't worry. Like, look over here. Here's a squeezy toy. It's like, no, he was actually right.
Yeah. And as he said, he's one of the best riders in the world. Why would you do that? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I had actually forgotten about that. And that's one of those things. That's why the show's good because you don't really notice. I'm not focused on Ben O'Connor and Ajay Duer when I'm watching the race.
Only
And
French TV is.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting to have that peeled back a little bit. And then this is where you're seeing a little bit more of Jai Hindley and Bora. My note on Jai Hindley, all I have is doesn't really seem to be overthinking things. And like that really jumped out to me. Just like,
Definitely
yeah, I
relaxed.
want to have the yellow jersey. That'd be sick. He's like wins a stage.
Yeah.
He's like gets the yellow jersey. He's like, this is awesome. Like like it's exactly how you got to be.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we haven't gotten into later episodes, so I don't know what happens to him after the wheels come off, and then now he's a support rider basically, and he's no longer going to be riding for GC at the tour ever again. So I don't know how he feels. Right? I mean, things may have changed a bit since we saw that episode. I'm curious
if
to see where the storyline heads.
if I was his friend, I would probably say it's easy to say that now, but like look at Visma. Like who would have thought Matteo Jorgensen would be their GC leader at the tour?
Yeah,
Like
true.
people can just fall like flies. So just like
Yeah,
keep on keeping on. I also thought it was really interesting. Ralph Denk shows up again, standing on the final climb, handing up bottles by himself to
right.
riders. Hands Hindley a bottle. And he's just by himself. This is the team owner, and then he's crying because he's so happy Hindley won. Just like standing alone amongst the fans at the top of the last climb. Like that was, I was pretty impressed by that.
I was too. I thought it was awesome. That's the spirit of gravel, actually.
We found
Hey,
the spirit of
right?
gravel
That's where it is. It's yeah,
a German Tour de France team. And
yeah.
you're kind of kidding, but actually, I actually could see a lot of these gravel, like, product manager at at Specialized, like thinking that that's below. I'm like, I'm not going to go hand up bottles or do it just for do it for the cameras, but like Denk is like hoofing it up there, handing up bottles. Like there's no helicopters whisking him down to the finish line. You could not imagine like Patrick Lefevre doing this, or even like Jonathan Vaughters. Like Vaughters would want to be at the finish line, soaking up the publicity for himself with his rider. And I was just so impressed. It's like, no, this guy's just like, he's just about the sport. That's like what he cares about.
Yeah, he loves it. It's incredible.
And then the end of this episode is like Empire Strikes Back. So, I mean, this was so cool how this worked out at the race where stage 5, Jonas attacks, drops Tadej Pogacar, almost catches Jai Hindley, flying, absolutely flying. And then Wiesman's like, ooh, we're feeling it. We're the man. This is great. Stage 6 rolls around. Oh, you just have to go up and over the Tourmalet. Don't worry about that. Only one of the hardest climbs in the race. I had forgotten about this. They absolutely destroy the climb. Mid-stage, like it's 3, I think it's 3 Wiesma riders plus Pogacar are all that's left in the middle of the
Right.
stage.
Right.
Jonas attacks, doesn't drop Tadej, gets to the final climb. It's like one of these tough, like nondescript final climbs up to a ski station. And Tadej Pogacar just absolutely smacks him. I mean, that must be one of his best, like, watt per kilo performances of his career. Like, goes nuts, rides away, gets the yellow jersey, and the episode ends, and it's like, oof, like, not as easy as you thought it would be, Visma. The champion has struck back. So I thought that was a great end of the episode.
Yeah, and I had forgotten some of these moments. So again, it just reminded me how incredible the start of the tour was last year before it became a bit pro forma towards the end.
Yeah, and you're 6 days in, and it's just like so much is going on. And some people would push back and say, like, well, you buried all the good stuff at the beginning, and then that's why the tour got boring. But the tour kind of gets boring no matter what. Like, we might as well have our fun at the beginning, just get into it, and then let the race sort itself out. I'm looking back. So, no, sorry, Tadej did not take the yellow jersey. I misremembered this.
No, Jonas took the yellow jersey but lost the stage. He took it by 30 seconds.
Yes,
And
from Jai Hindley.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And they were really pissed off with that. I think that day they wanted to shut the door and they wanted the race to be over. And instead they got that result and they were a bit freaked out.
Yes, which kind of shows a genius of the course design, because it's like a trap laid out for them. Oh, let's shut the door in 6 stages. Well, like the tour doesn't really work like that, and they
Yeah.
got to see why, because they're racing against really good riders. This was this is a great episode, one of my favorites. And then we go to episode 3. You have anything else to say about episode 2 before I move on?
Just how great it was and how much greater it was in contrast with episode 3, which we're about to discuss.
Yes. Well,
And yeah, maybe I'll lead off episode 3 by saying by the time we get to episode 3, part of the formula of this show is the context they give while introducing any writer. It's the writer at home with their partner or wife. And I was just like, by episode 3, I just kept thinking, can you give us some other setup to try to show, I don't know, these people might be like a piece of cardboard personality wise. I don't know, but like something other than, okay, like we're starting a fire and having a conversation. And let's talk
that was my favorite part of the episode. Like, what is this
so
house?
yeah. So how are you thinking about, why are you starting a fire in late June?
I kept thinking that. I was like,
where are you? Are you on Hoth?
What's the
Like, you're going to cut a
temperature?
tauntaun open? Yeah.
It is Europe. I'm moving to France on Monday for an extended period of time, and it is cold. I will say I'm shocked by the forecast. It is colder than it is in the United States, this sun-baked country we live in. Last thought on episode 2. I do think this episode did a good job of showing you, when you are a casual observer, you think American, American, they must be friends. Australian, Australian, they must be friends. And they're like fierce competitors, fierce. Like Ben O'Connor is
Right.
driven insane by the fact that Jai Hindley won the stage and got the yellow jersey. And he's probably somewhat happy for him. And it's probably helpful because you're like, well, that guy is just like me. So if he can do it, I can do it. If you can see it, you can believe it, or whatever the saying is. But there's not like big love there. And I actually do think that that's a good reminder. You can kind of be tricked a little bit where you're like, American Nielsen Palace. I'm not saying anything about these guys, but like Nielsen Palace and Matteo Jorgensen, they must be best friends. But that's not really how that works. Being a rider from the same country, and a lot of the times you're more competitive with those people than you are people you don't know as well.
Yeah, I don't think Scott McGill's ringing up Mateo to go spearfishing.
He's getting a snub on that, and that's Mateo's loss. But so episode 3, No Mercy. Alpes and DeConnick star sprinter Jasper Philipsen stops at nothing to win every stage while Mark Cavendish looks to set a new tour record. And I got to say, I started this last night. I did fall asleep like 10 minutes in, and then I had to finish it this morning. And I, my note is just lots of sprint drama. The deviation storylines really bore me, both in real life and in this show. Like, did it just felt like, okay, it's like Mark Cavendish at home, Jasper Philipsen at home. Like Mark Cavendish is trying to get the tour record. I mean, his kid, incredible cyclist. Holy smokes, riding around on grass in drops on a real road bike. Like, get that kid a contract. He might be too old for UAE at this point, but someone sign him. And then
Sign his baby. Sign the 1-year-old.
yeah, the 1-year-old. That's the market efficiency right there. But once they get to the race, it just felt like this. It's just so formulaic. I think we had the same episode last year where it's like, in sprints, people are going left and right, and he pushed me, but the judges said he didn't push me, and then I'm mad, and then it felt like it was trying to set up Philipsen. I liked the Jasper disaster storyline last year. It's like this guy can't do anything right, and then his team's kind of mad at him, and it just felt like they were trying to set Alpes and DeConnick up as like the Death Star. Like they have these two dispassionate brothers who run the team,
Rudolph.
the Rudolphs.
Rudolph.
The Rudolphs are not messing around, and it like Philipsen's a bad guy, a bully, and he's going left and right, and Vanderpool is that was actually pretty clever. He's the one who got deviated on that sprint that Philipsen won, and then he gets relegated, but who cares? Like he pushed them
Yeah.
out so that he could launch Philipsen. Really smart move, actually. Kind of a rule they should maybe try to fix. But other than that, it's just like, okay, like they're either going to rule that he deviated or not. Like I'm sick of just having the same conversation and argument every time there's a sprint finish. I mean, am I out of line here?
The thing that it made me think about when Philipsen gets called into the commissaire's trailer RV, I don't know, like, right? So after
Yeah.
the first sprint where he deviates from his line and almost puts somebody into the barriers, he's sitting there. I remember this moment watching it live. He's about to get interviewed. Pog comes up and is like, "Well, did you win?" Or like, "What's happening?"
Yeah.
Which I was like, I just Pog Pog is just like his psychology is incredible. I love that guy. I just absolutely love him. I think he's one of my favorite athletes, not just as a competitor, but just the way he approaches everything, his understanding of people, his light humor during intense moments, and his ability to manipulate people. All just, I think it's incredible. I love watching that guy operate. So Philipsen gets called into the commissar's trailer eventually, and it's one of those moments. It's like what's in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. I want to know what happened in that room, and I wonder if we know anyone who does know, or anyone who's listening to this. Maybe you're a fly on the wall. I'd love to hear about what actually happened. Because why did they bring him in? Do you
Well,
think that they warned him to not do it
yeah.
again in the future?
Were you surprised that they brought him in? I didn't think that you were allowed to go in there as a writer.
Exactly. So something weird happened. I think they brought him in and said, if you do this again, this is what's going to happen. And then they didn't do anything and kept allowing him to ride people into the barriers. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, because and the rule is wonderfully vague. It's something like you can't deviate from your line and endanger someone. Well, it's like, well, define endanger. Like, is that
A sprint is endangering people.
crashing? So only if you crash them did you endanger them.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's the root hoof interpretation. But if they came in and they said, don't do this again, we're not going to DQ you. What lesson did he learn there? Well, I should just keep doing this and keep winning, because really, like, sprinting is just breaking as many rules as you can get away with to block other people or make them too afraid to launch their sprint, and winning. Like, the act of sprinting it's insane, and it's just like, how much can you fudge the rules and still get away with it?
Yeah. The other things that jumped out at me in that episode when Vanderpool is introduced, He says something like, "I'm Matthew Vanderpool. I'm Jasper Philipsen's lead out man."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. So I think maybe a bit more context would have been good, even for the average viewer,
I mean, you'd have to be
on that
really,
one.
yeah, they're assuming that he's like one of the best, at least one day riders of all time, and is a massive superstar who could really do anything he wants, and he is choosing to lead out a sprinter at the tour, which is
Yeah.
crazy and unprecedented.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought they could have put some more context there. Like, who is this
Yeah.
guy and what is he doing? Like, the sacrifice he is making is unbelievable.
Yeah. That was unbelievable. I thought it was unintentionally funny, interesting choice in the narrative. And then the other thing, I was like, I started having flashbacks. I was wondering what was going on. Maybe I was in an ayahuasca ceremony. We see Caleb Ewan almost win a stage at the Tour de France, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, am I hallucinating? What's happening here?
Right. So he got second on one of the stages and was within like the width of a tire of winning the stage,
And I
I think,
believe
which
that
I'd
was it,
completely
right?
forgotten. Yeah, I'd completely forgotten about.
And then
So
he's
not that,
never.
yeah.
So then, yes, that is wild. We're also, so Mark Cavendish, stage 7 into Bordeaux, gets second. His like gears were skipping. I do remember this. Like, once they reminded me of it, I did remember this. Are you surprised there's like as much equipment malfunction at that level? Or is this just like,
Only for Mark Cavendish. The guy is like what's going on with Mark Cavendish's bike? He says there's something special about his sprinting technique that makes him drop his chain and no one else's chain drops. He's always changing bikes, he's changing wheels near the finish, and then we get this weird,
he is
it's skipping
changing
from the
wheels
11.
a lot near the
Well, hold
finish?
on. If am I recalling right? They didn't say this, but there was a stage at the tour last year before he crashed out where he did actually change wheels on a bike prior to the finish.
That
Maybe
actually
it was this
might be
stage.
the stage that he had the problem, which would explain the problem.
Maybe they could have talked about.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
actually,
I
it was
think it was like within 10K of the finish. I think he like stopped and had a wheel change, which was super weird. But something that surprised me, it didn't surprise me. It really delighted me. I don't think I have ever seen Alexander Vinokurov smile
I know.
right in all
Yeah,
the years I've been following the sport. He was smiling on that bus. That was incredible. I
he
was
looked
like,
like
that's
happy man Vinokurov, just like having a
yeah,
good time.
yeah. How
Yeah.
about that?
So I'm looking at Caleb Ewan. Yeah, that was his, like, he got second on the stage into Dax. Wait, no, Nagaro. Third on stage 3, second on stage 4, and then that was his last result at a World Tour stage race, or race, a World Tour race of any kind. Wow, what could have been? That's interesting. But yeah, Vinokurov looking just like happiest man in the world. Like,
Looking fit, tanned, hair looked good.
just looked incredible. Yeah, it's like I need.
Yeah, I really wanted there to be a Vinokurov interview. Maybe we'll get one later in the race. I kind of doubt it, given at this point Cav has now crashed out of the tour in Unchained. But give the people what they want. Give us Vinokurov.
I want a whole Vinokurov show. My,
Absolutely.
I
Yeah, I agree.
Your comment reminded me of it. There were some weird tours, and they had to find like storylines because Lance was like in the zone, just crushing everybody. Might have been 2004, where like him and Ulrich were racing against each other, both on T-Mobile, and he was doing really well. And he claimed not to speak English and would only communicate, I believe, in French in his interviews, but like broken French. And then like stage 15 just like breaks out the fact that he spoke English the whole time. Like Vinokurov is, this guy is like playing chess and we're all playing checkers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that's it for the 3 episodes. I would say Geraint Thomas is not in this because he did not race the tour last year. So we will not
Oh,
be seeing
okay.
any Geraint
I
Thomas.
misremembered. I still think we could have used a few shots, a little background, maybe.
I think our next episode might be the Ineos, beginning of the Ineos drama, which it's interesting because I was actually talking to someone this week and I was like, yeah, Andrew thinks that like there's going to be drama at Visma, but how can you have drama when you're not like competing for the race win? And I think you mentioned Movistar, but Ineos would be a great example of that too, where it's like, how did they have leadership drama last year? So I am dying to see how this plays out.
I can't wait.
No, I want 13th. No, I want 13th. I'm not riding for you to get. That reminds me of last year at the Vuelta where Vlasov and Uterbrooks were fighting for 7th place, and then Uterbrooks was so mad the team didn't defend his 7th place that he left the
Yeah.
team in the offseason. It's a wild times we're living in. But thanks, Andrew. We will get cracking on the next batch of these episodes and get the podcast out as soon as we can.